Okay, so now we're going to try our hand at using those 8 criteria to create one particular program. So let's set ourselves some parameters, okay? First of all, cash. We're trying to save some money, so we're going to do a standard size orchestra. We're not going to do something that requires large forces if we can, so we're going to try to keep the numbers down, so we're going to be very cognizant of the numbers. The ability of the orchestra, let's say that we have some good subs for this particular concert plus our core group, so we're good to go. We can play just about anything. Desires, let's just say that our audience from last season got treated to some more adventurous programming, and then we've gotten some feedback saying that they'd like to hear some more familiar fare or see some more familiar names on the program, so we're going to keep that in mind. History, well, we'll go back and look at history, and let's just say that the standard stuff we've played, so we can't be repeating those. No more Beethoven 5s or Beethoven 3 or Beethoven 7 or Dvorak New World Symphony or Tchaikovsky Symphony number 4 or 5. All the big names we're not going to be able to do. So we're going to have to look for different pieces, and maybe pieces by the big names that maybe aren't as well known. Okay, availability, let's just say we're not going to use any rental because that costs a lot of money. We're just going to use what we own or what we can borrow. Soloists, we're going to be looking for our usual groups that we go to, Young Concert Artists and Concert Artists Guild, because they vet the people who come in, have a competition, and they're always very, very good and affordable. And finally, the fit. Let's just see how it goes with our season, and let's just say our season is something very loose, like the great masters. So we're going to try to stick with names that we know well. Okay, so let's say that we've gone to the library, we've looked, and this is what we've got. In our library, we own the following overtures: Rossini, Barber of Seville, Mozart, Marriage of Figaro, Glinka, Ruslan und Ludmilla, Offenbach, Orpheus in the Underworld, and Smetana, Bartered Bride Overture. Now we've got all those available. So let's look at each one. Say each one of these, the overtures have various lengths. Barber of Seville is 8 minutes long, but the Marriage of Figaro, Ruslan and Ludmilla, they're each 4 to 5 minutes. Offenbach's Orpheus in the Underworld is 10. Smetana, Bartered Bride is 7. So let's just say we don't want to do something that's too long, so we're going to eliminate the Offenbach because it's 10 minutes long. Also, if we look at the instrumentation, it requires 3 percussionists and harp. So harp is extra, and those 3 percussionists, or at least 2 of them, are going to be extra. So it'll be expensive, so Offenbach's out of the picture. Ruslan und Ludmilla requires a contrabassoon, so 2 bassoons and a contrabassoon. So that's an extra instrument. And it also asks for 5 percussionists. So that's going to be too much percussion, so we're going to cut that out. That leaves the Barber of Seville, the Marriage of Figaro, and the Smetana Bartered Bride Overture. Now, the Bartered Bride has 3 flutes, so that's 1 extra win, but that's not too bad. And it's 7 minutes long, and for an overture, that's not bad, but if we wanted to keep things on the shorter side, it's always nice to think less. Now, the Rossini Barber of Seville is 8 minutes long, so it's even longer, but it's very, very well known. Everybody knows that overture. They know Rossini, they know Barber of Seville, so it has a lot of drawing power. It's 8 minutes long, but it uses a small orchestra, so we'll see how that works out. Then there's the Marriage of Figaro Overture, and that's only 4 minutes long, and it uses a small orchestra. So we'll be coming back to that, but let's say Rossini is a possibility, Mozart's a possibility. Okay, our violinist, we've got a repertoire list, and a repertoire list says that she can play the Brahms Concerto, Bruch, Mendelssohn, Mozart, Sibelius, Tchaikovsky, and Vieuxtemps. So let's look through all those. First off, the Vieuxtemps requires harp, and since we eliminated harp because of the Offenbach, we're going to eliminate that too. So Vieuxtemps is out. Let's look at some of the other concertos. Now we want something very dynamic, a great vehicle. Now Mozart concertos are very difficult to play, and you have to keep a lot of things in tune, but because it's classical, it's not as dynamic as a romantic concerto. So let's just say that we want to go dynamic. So we're going to eliminate the Mozart. That leaves us Tchaikovsky, Sibelius, Mendelssohn, Bruch, and Brahms. Now the Brahms is 38 minutes long, so that might be a little long for a concerto. So let's eliminate it just because it's 38 minutes. May not be too long, but we're going to do it just on statistical evidence here. Okay, so we've got Bruch, Mendelssohn, Sibelius, and Tchaikovsky. Now the Tchaikovsky Concerto is great, and it uses a smaller orchestra. The Sibelius Concerto also uses a smaller orchestra as well. Mendelssohn and Bruch are smaller ones too. Bruch is 24 minutes, Mendelssohn is 26, Sibelius is 31, Tchaikovsky is 33. So we've got kind of 4 to choose from. Okay, so to recap, if we go back to our overtures, we have Rossini, Barber, Seville, 8 minutes, Mozart, Major Figaro, 4 minutes. So we might want to pair the Rossini with a shorter concerto and the Mozart with a longer one. So we've got Bruch, which is 24 minutes, the Mendelssohn, which is 26. The Sibelius is 31, and the Tchaikovsky is 33. So Sibelius and Tchaikovsky might do well with Mozart, and maybe Bruch and Mendelssohn might do well with Rossini and Mozart. But let's just see how the symphony fleshes out. Okay, so we look in our library, and we look at the libraries that we can borrow from, and we have names like Tchaikovsky, but Symphony Number 2, because as we said, 4 and 5 have been done too many times. Brahms 3, Dvorak 7, Mendelssohn Number 5, and we've got some Mozart ones, 39 and 40, the famous G minor, Sibelius Symphony Number 2, Schumann 1. Okay, so those are the ones we have in our library. So let's look at these. Well, the Brahms Symphony requires a contrabassoon, so an extra bassoon, and it doesn't get played that often just simply because it has a soft ending. And if we're going for a dynamic and we want the ending to go bang, it's a psychological thing, I know, because it bangs all over in that piece, and it's a wonderful symphony. But let's just say for argument's sake we want to go pow, so we're going to eliminate the Brahms Third Symphony. Now, dynamic. We're taking Mendelssohn out of the equation because number 5, it's not terribly dynamic, and it's not as well known as Symphony Number 3 and 4, which we don't have up here because they've been played recently in our fictitious season. So maybe not terribly dynamic. We can take that out. Now Mozart 39, Mozart 40, they're terrific symphonies, and they have some exciting things, but if we're really trying to wow our audience and even wow our audiences that don't normally come, who are used to John Williams and massive film scores, we probably want to not put Mozart in there either. Okay, so that leaves us with Tchaikovsky, Little Russian, Dvorak, Symphony Number 7, Sibelius Number 2, and Schumann Symphony Number 1. So if we are looking for that dynamic thing, which ones are the most dynamic of those symphonies? Sibelius Symphony Number 2 arguably has a lot. It has a big bang to it, and it's very popular. Dvorak Symphony Number 7 also the same. The Tchaikovsky Little Russian is not as well known, but it's catching on. But it does use one extra wind. It has 3 flutes. And the Schumann is on the same view, in my view, as the Mendelssohn. So it's not as dynamic. So if we were to go with dynamicism, then we'd have to say Sibelius and probably Dvorak Symphony Number 7. We eliminated the Tchaikovsky Number 2 because of the wind. So Dvorak 7, Sibelius 2. But Sibelius 2 has 3 trumpets in it. But it may be that the dynamicism of that piece is worth that extra cost. So if we go back, we've got Barber of Seville Overture, the Mozart Major Figaro Overture, and then we have the Bruch, Mendelssohn, Sibelius, Tchaikovsky concertos that are available to us. And then we have Dvorak Symphony Number 7 and Sibelius Symphony Number 2. So if we go through that and we can put together a sample concert and say, let's try the Rossini Barber of Seville. And that's 8 minutes long, and we can pair that with, say, the the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto. That's a dynamic concerto. Everyone loves that. So you've got a super familiar overture, the Barber of Seville, and you have this super well-known concerto and a dynamic concerto, the Tchaikovsky. So we can do that, and then we can pair that with the Dvorak Symphony No. 7, which is about 35 minutes long and uses a standard size orchestra. So we can do all that and use a standard size orchestra and not use too many extra players. Or we can take the Mozart, which is only 4 minutes and a very small orchestra, and the Bruch Concerto, which is only 24 minutes and a very small orchestra. And then, because we got the small group, we can go for the Dvorak, or we can go with the Sibelius. And we can gamble on the cost of that third trumpet and have a super dynamic concert. So, what do we have? We have Rossini, Barber of Seville, Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, Dvorak Symphony No. 7. Or we can switch out the Rossini and put the Mozart in there, because the Barber of Seville requires 2 percussionists. There's no percussionists in the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto or the Dvorak. So they'd be only used in the overture. So if we didn't want to just hire 2 percussionists just for the overture, then we could take the Rossini out and substitute the Mozart. So we'd have the Mozart Major Figure Overture, the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, and Dvorak Symphony No. 7. And then we hit all of our points. There'll be pieces that haven't been played recently. They are public domain in our library. They don't use extra players. And the length of time puts it neatly under 2 hours to do that performance. So at this point, I would probably say that's a pretty good bet. So I would put that down as one of the pieces of the 5 that I would be proposing to the board of the symphony, and we would price the thing out, price the rest of the season out, and everything looks good, then that's what we would do. And you would get a well-known overture in the Rossini, and this dynamic violin concerto, which you probably know already and you've heard, and then the Dvorak Symphony No. 7, which is probably not as well known as the New World Symphony, but is a terrific work that is full of the dynamicism that we're looking for. So we'd settle on that. But as you can see as we go along, there were other choices that we could have thrown in there and decided, as I said, to gamble on the extra musicians here and there, or go with a little more length, or even shorter than what we did. But all of these figure in. So is this the perfect program from all of our criterion? Maybe not. But it's one that fits it, and there's probably other ones too. And if you were the music director, you might have gone a different direction in any of these pieces, just choosing these and put together a completely different program than what we just did now. The point is that we are trying to follow some criteria, and those are the criterion, those 8 points that I gave you earlier, so that we would follow those and come together for a great program. So, just to recap, what I always look at is the money. Do we have the money? How much is it going to cost? The ability. Do we have the horses in the stable to run the race? Desires. What does our audience want? What do they enjoy hearing? History. What have we done in the past so we don't repeat? Time. Stay within the confines of a smaller program, not to go over time. Availability of the music, and soloists, what their availability is and how much they cost and how it fits into our theme of the season. So that's kind of a general idea of what I do often with all these resources and going back and forth and putting these together. And that's just one program. Putting them together for many more and trying to fit them all together so they have some relation to each other makes it even a more of a challenge to do. So I hope you enjoyed this look at programming for a symphony orchestra, and we'll see you next time for the next Midweek Maestro Message. Thanks for watching, and stay safe.